Welcome back, YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking, before we stick my 351 based Windsor back in my black turbo car, I wanted to show you some of the differences between 302 and 351. It's specifically useful for those people that are interested in going to 351 from a 302. Let's get into it. On your right, you got the stock 302, stock based 302, and on the left is my turbo 351. 351 based engines naturally are bigger motors than 302s. And this is something that you have to actually compensate for when you're putting it in a Fox body. Now, Fox body came factory with a 302. Now, you only have so much room in here, and then if you have your Fox body, you'll see your engine bay isn't very big. You know what I mean? It's not like it's a truck or a larger passenger vehicle where they have more room. So naturally, you're going to run into fitment issues. And some of the things about fitment issues you need to understand when you're switching from a 302 to a 351, you're going to have your distributors aren't the same. 302 is shorter than a 351. And this is because a 351 is still considered a small block. They actually made a couple of extra ones that are a little bit bigger, but this is the mass-produced production 351 is one of the larger small blocks, and the 302 is not. And that has to do with stroke. It's got a bigger stroke. It's got a bigger crank. It has the same size pistons, but the block itself is different, and it's a larger deck by about 1.2 inches. Pretty sure that the factory 351, without getting into specific specs, is like 9.4 inch deck height. And when we refer to deck height, we're referring to how tall the deck is. The 302 is an 8.2 deck, and that's a shorter deck. It's got a shorter stroke. It's got a smaller crank. You see here, the 351 is actually about 11 inches wide, whereas the 302 base is only about 8.5, 9. It's just a brief, easy overview of what we're looking at. When you want to transfer from a 302 to a 351 to make it fit in a Fox body, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I had to buy. Fuel rails were different, naturally, because the intake was wider. Lower intake was different. Upper stuff fit, but the lower was different. Distributor was different. Your front accessory drives, so you're going to have to compensate for that. The oil pan was different. A 351 production motor actually is a 28-ounce imbalance, external imbalance. The flywheel and the harmonic balancer. Whereas the stock 302 back when the Fox body, it's 50-ounce balancer, 50-ounce flywheel external. So, a lot of the brackets will still fit on a 351, but it's wider. It's bigger. Another issue you run into is exhaust. Since the 351 is wider, okay, it's got a wider base to it, you got a tighter exhaust window here, aka headers. If you throw your headers off and your headers are wider, then most H-pipes won't fit that. So it's kind of specific. Another issue you have, and it's a big issue, is a 351 fitting under a stock hood. It's tough to do, especially on a fuel injection car. Now, carbureted cars are a little bit easier to get a 351 to fit under the hood. But then again, that's carbureted, so naturally it's not going to have an upper portion of the intake. It's going to have an air cleaner and a carbureted lower. Naturally, there's just a lot of things that do not convert that you have to think about when you're transferring to a 351 motor. Ignition, fuel delivery, exhaust, flywheel, balancer if it doesn't already have on it. Most of the 351s are not roller. Like, they came out with an FE block, and I want to say the first year for the FE block is 94. But they were factory roller motors. So that's another issue when you're transferring your parts from a 302 to a 351 is your camshaft. If it's a roller camshaft, you have to either convert your 351 to roller by drilling out the two bosses. Let me explain the two bosses. What I'm talking about by the bosses is these two right here. It's the two 7/16 bolts that actually hold your dog bone retainer in. 351 doesn't have that naturally. They do have circles there. If you look in the 351 block, when we were machining this block, I actually drilled those 2 holes, and you have to be careful because those holes go into a cam bearing boss. So one of the things you can do mechanically is you can still run your roller camshaft out of your 302, but you either have to do the drilling or you have to run link bar lifters. And link bar lifters are just like this. And they're sort of expensive. I have Morels in mine, and these are trick flow. Excellent lifters to run. They're a great upgrade, but expensive. A lot of your parts from your 302 will convert over to a 351, but there's a lot of parts that do not. So I wanted to be informative and show you some examples, and you can naturally see how much bigger that motor is compared to this one. And we're about to drop it into the black GT, and you'll see that in my other video if you want to take a chance to look, or want to look at it. But I appreciate everybody. Please, if you have anything to add to the 302 to 351 conversion, go ahead and add it in the comments. Litter my comments with good information, because this is why we do stuff on the internet. And this is why me and Cousin Paul and Cousin Fred and Neomustangs do this stuff, because this stuff's going to be on YouTube for a long time. So it might help somebody, it might not. And the more information we have for people in the future, and then it stays permanent, you know what I mean? So going back to the hood, you can see where my TPS was hitting and my turbo was hitting over there. Now, this is a Cobra SVO hood. This fits my 351 stroker to a T. Like literally it sits right on top of it. But putting an EFI 351 in a Fox body, it's not going to clear a stock hood very well at all. Even with the drop mounts, because then you run into rack and pinion problems when you run the drop mounts. I just wanted to actually show you guys a brief, easy, informational video about what it took and some of the things it took me to get my 351 to fit in my Fox body. It's not clean, cut, and dry. It's not something that you can just do overnight. There's a lot of parts that don't transfer, and there's a lot of parts that do that you would be surprised about. Make sure you guys hit all the comments below if there's something I didn't talk about and there's something I didn't add to it. So make sure you go out and check some of those other channels out too that support me. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you like our Fox body content, and I'll see you in the next video.